Before getting into the episode that follows, I want to provide an update that came from the most recent Landmine Monitor report. It concluded that Myanmar has recorded the largest number of annual casualties from landmines for the first time in its reporting. As the country marks this grim milestone, Insight Myanmar is producing a monthly series, Navigating a Minefield, centering on the people at greatest risk as well as survivors of traumatic attacks. The series will feature Burmese and international experts providing important context about landmine use and explosive remnants of war endangering communities across the country. In cooperation with our media and humanitarian partners, we hope that this vital information will support risk education, raise awareness, and inspire action based on our shared responsibility to end this terrible threat to civilians. More about the episodes, as well as risk education resources, are available on the Insight Myanmar website. For now, let's get into the episode that follows.
Hello, this is E, your host for Inside Myanmar's today's podcast episode. And allow me to introduce our guest today, Lorcan Lovett. He is a seasoned journalist. He is working in Southeast Asia for a long time, and particularly in Myanmar since 2017. And this is not the first time that Lorcan has been on Inside Myanmar podcast. So his first episode was on Inside Myanmar, and it's called Through Hell and High Water. In that episode, he discussed the Myanmar's people's effort to go through hell and high water to remove military seat of power and to restore democracy. So to our listeners, if you haven't listened to it already, I highly recommend you give it a listen. In today's episode, we're going to move away from these topics, and I want to start by asking Lorcan regarding his recent article in the Guardian newspaper, and that is on the daily logs of Aung San Suu Kyi and her life in prison. So the two daily logs that I was referring are dated to January 5th, 2024, and then February 12th, 2024. So they're about a year and a half old right now. So at this point, since the coup, when Aung San Suu Kyi was arrested together with the president Win Myint, no one from the public has seen or heard from her, including her legal team. It's really hard for the legal team to speak to media. And also her own son, Kim Aris, also said that it is hard to gain communications with her. He only received one letter from her throughout the entire time she was jailed. So while considering these situations, Lorcan, together with his colleague Paing, has managed to gain access to these daily logs of Aung San Suu Kyi. So Lorcan, I want to ask you about how you guys pull it off. I mean, I imagine it was not an easy feat to get your hands on those logs, right? So, since you're a journalist, and I know that you need to protect your sources, and the security and safety of the people that we talk to is always a priority. So bearing in mind that, can you tell us as much as you can on the process of how you got a hands on these daily logs of Aung San Suu Kyi?
Okay, yeah, sure. So first of all, hi, it's a pleasure to be with you today. Good evening from Thailand, and thanks very much for having me back on the podcast. So this story, Aung San Suu Kyi in prison, one of the most recognizable stories from outside of Myanmar. When you think about Myanmar, people often think about Aung San Suu Kyi, but she's disappeared since the coup. We still don't know really where she's being held. She's been moved along with the former ousted president, U Win Myint. So it's a huge story, and my colleague Htet Paing and I came across this quite a long time ago, and it took us months and months to get the story into shape and for us to feel happy and confident with the story and verifying the story through various means. So how did we do that? Well, first of all, Htet Paing, who I've known and I've worked with since 2017, is a great journalist, a great writer, and we looked over this material of the logs, which go, if you haven't seen them, you can see them on Myanmar, my Substack as well. They're very detailed logs going through her different medications and the meager rations of food that she's eaten, although she's not known to be a big eater, but still there's the largest meal of the day that on one occasion she had was a little bit of chicken, a little bit of rice, 2 pieces of chocolate. She's not eating much. So we were compelled by the detail of these logs that we were given by a trusted and well-informed source who was affiliated with a resistance-aligned group who you might be familiar with called People's Embrace. The source was known to us since before the coup. Since after the coup, I've worked with People's Embrace, and I'm familiar with a few of their representatives. So it wasn't a bolt out of the blue. This was a kind of familiar group to us. The source was very cautious about engaging with media. So she wanted to work with someone who she was also familiar with. People's Embrace, just for listeners who might not know People's Embrace, they're a group of defectors who foster networks of so-called watermelons. These are members of the military and the police who appear loyal to the junta, but they secretly support the pro-democracy movement. And they're still inside the junta system. That's their main focus. It's not gaining publicity. It's not kind of getting big stories like this. People's Embrace focus is about fostering those networks. So the logs aligned with some publicly known details of Aung San Suu Kyi's health issues, as well as her reading and meditation habits during previous periods of detention, because, she spent, how long was it? It was like 20 years 15 years out of 21 years, 15 of the 21 years before she came into government, she'd spent in various locations in detention, mostly in house arrest then. So her habits were known. The logs, this is quite important. I have to be careful about what I say here, but the logs gave specific names of staff members listed in the logs. We didn't publicize those names. They just happened to be there as well. It was a level of detail that just led us to seek further, independent verification. So we reached out to a source who I can't really talk about, but it's a source in Myanmar who's well connected, who has no affiliation to that group. And it was very difficult to talk to them, but we managed to talk to them. And that person's very familiar with what's going on with the junta and Aung San Suu Kyi, and they confirmed the video and the authenticity of the logs for us, which was a really important step on verifying the material as a whole, because this person has nothing to do with People's Embrace or the resistance. And then we spoke to Suu Kyi's son, as you mentioned, Kim. And after I described the contents of the logs, He confirmed that the reported health issues and other details matched what he had learned through his own sources. He believed the logs were authentic. And then it was a few other interviews, just checking various details. For instance, Sean Turnell was convicted wrongly, of course, in the same courts that Suu Kyi was, and I showed him the screenshot from the video, so we were able to verify like the court in that way. We published a story with the Guardian, and they're really really strict about this kind of thing. So I had many conversations with the editorial team in the Guardian about how we got this as well. It's a really stringent process. But me and Tin were very confident all along because we've been working on Myanmar for a long time, and we know, when it's real, right? So given our long-standing relationship with the source, my previous reports on People's Embrace and my history with them and Tin's, and the separate corroboration from a prison the second verification from an independent source, our interview with Kim, and then the kind of internal consistency and the specific nature of the material, we were able to authenticate them.
I understand that the process must be painstakingly hard, and also in this kind of situation, right? The Aung San Suu Kyi's health situation about gum issue or other various things has been rumored, but we never really got this much detail on her daily life since she has been arrested since the beginning of the coup. And so I am thinking that, like, what can we speculate from the details of the log? You said she doesn't really eat much. I see that she has some fruit, some piece of chocolate, or some meals, and because she gets up around 4:30, goes to bed around 8. We can judge from that, from this limited information that we have. I suppose it would be a terrible thing for her to fall very ill at this old age, and God forbid she pass away under the military hand, right? Like, because before, in her previous incarceration or previous imprisonment, she did hunger strikes before. So with judging from this log, it doesn't seem like anything out of ordinary is happening. It seems like a very standard day with a meditation. So what also, as a journalist who wrote on this, what is your speculation on her health or wellness from this very limited information that we have on this log?
Well, I'm not a medical professional, obviously, so I can't say with with confidence what's wrong with Aung San Suu Kyi. I went to a doctor actually to talk about it, Dr. Aung Kyaw, who himself was imprisoned in Yangon's insane prison for treating protesters after the coup. And so I relied on him for insights into her health. He said that the medication, like for neck pain, for sore gums, the gums seem to be a real problem, and the teeth. They're only addressing their pain management, right? They're not really addressing the root causes. So, he said for an 80-year-old spending so much time in prison, and who spent so much time in prison as well, it's a really worrying situation. Although she, based on those records, she didn't seem like extremely ill at that moment. She just seemed like she was in a lot of pain. But of course, her condition could get worse, and the military seemed to be providing the minimum standard of medical care, just the pain management medication, and not any surgeries or any specialists. Her food intake as we said, is so low as well, and probably impaired by the gum and teeth problems. So that's why in the logs you see that she takes like some nutrient shakes as well. but she's probably got some vitamin deficiencies. She's not going outside apparently. So, I should say that the limitation to our story was that it only captured like a moment in time, a few days for Suu Kyi. So I don't know what's happened to her since then. What I do know is that she was not allowed really to go outside. So if that's still the case, there will be a problem there with like vitamin D, right? Um,
Yeah.
that can be very bad. You get susceptible to infections, especially in a prison environment when there's lots of COVID and TB going around
Hmm.
in Myanmar prisons, skin infections. Um, so I think that concerned the doctor as well. So yeah.
Yeah, so not just the logs, but you also obtained the courtroom footage from August 2022 as well. So in the footage, you can see Aung San Suu Kyi appearing in court with a mask on. So it is about 3 years old at this point, this footage. So you talk about the process of verifying the authenticity of this log and the footage, but and also you said it takes months for you to verify and also actually wrote about it and show the public what you know. Why do you think these are like, I guess, like, this is leaked, right? Or like, but is it just, my question is that it is now, this is what the public have seen in little bits into Aung San Suu Kyi's life in prison, but before then we have no knowledge of her whereabout or her um whether if she's doing well or even alive. So is this the sign of life that we are being fed to, or is it leaked or is it planted?
Um, no, like it's not planted. It's not planted. I totally understand why Myanmar people will be suspicious about material regarding Suu Kyi because when you're raised in Myanmar, you're raised in an environment that is dominated by the Myanmar military and their propaganda, and it's natural to and actually healthy and good to distrust and be skeptical about material like this, especially after the coup as well. I remember even in the immediate weeks after the coup, the kind of psyop mind games that the military was playing on the public. So it's totally understandable that some people are skeptical about the authenticity of the material and the motivation behind its release. But Tin, Paing, and me were behind facilitating and doing this story. The military had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
We wanted to bring out the video and the logs together to make more of an impact ahead of Suu Kyi's 80th birthday, and and also People's Embrace were on board with the idea of having the biggest impact as possible for this, just because it would raise international awareness of the situation, not only of Suu Kyi but of Myanmar as well. So yeah, the whole thing took months of waiting and planning, but it didn't have anything to do with the military. I did ask the military actually after the
Yeah.
material. I said,
What did they say?
oh, they didn't respond to me. But
Oh,
but of course you have to, right? Like, and I'm
right.
every maybe one day they will respond, and I'm sure it'll be interesting. Um,
Yeah.
but they didn't respond to my kind of opportunity to give them their say in it as usual. So yeah.
Yeah, so also another thing I noticed that in the log, it's very detailed, right? Down
Mm.
to, her, from how many minutes she meditated to, who brought her the newspapers. And I noticed that, for the security of your sources, wipe that out for you white out for the publication. And so it says on the log that Aung San Suu Kyi received issues of the Mirror, New Light of Myanmar, and Myawaddy newspaper in prison. So she get access to this military propaganda newspaper. So somehow aware, she's somewhat aware of the state of the country, I suppose. But a lot of people mistake that she might be in house arrest right now, just like she was in the 90s. But no, she is in prison, and she's been moved many prison because of heat wave issue or different things. So right now we think she is in Naypyidaw, but I'm not sure. But when she was under house arrest, she could listen to radio on BBC and VOA, so she was more or less aware of what's going on outside. But now she is in prison, and so if these are the newspaper, these are the kind of news that she's getting, how much do you think she is even aware of the ongoing political situation?
Yes, that's a great question, and it's something that was really on my mind as I was doing this story. It's something that I've thought about a lot since the coup. How much does Suu Kyi know about the civil war that's engulfing her country? Does she know the extent of it? I assume that she might know that there was trouble, but does she know like how unprecedented this uprising is against the military, and in what a terrible state the country's in? I think based on this, yes, she does know that. She was, I believe, she's more aware than I thought she was before. Much more aware. These junta-controlled newspapers are obviously full of silly propaganda, but Suchi's going to be able to read between the lines. She's a very intelligent person. She'll be able to read between the lines of what's going on. I asked the Australian economist who I mentioned earlier on, Sean Turnell, about this because he spent I can't remember how quite a long time in prison, being moved around as well, and he also received these newspapers. And I asked him, "Oh well, what if they cut out articles of the newspapers?" And he said, "Look, there's a big difference between what the regime leader Min Aung Hlaing and the generals are saying and doing and thinking what's happening, and what the staff at the prison are doing and thinking and saying about what's happening. There's a huge gap between them." So he said, no, it's highly unlikely that they remove any articles from the newspapers. So then when I was researching the story, I went back to the dates of the logs, and I read the English language versions of the Global New Light and Myanmar Alin and other papers, Myawaddy newspaper, and there were some really detailed rebuttals about, I think it was a Karenni resistance group attacking the military, and the military denied this attack, but they denied it in such a way that they basically repeated what the Karenni army said. It was a KNDF story. So through that, I imagined like if I was in prison and knowing a bit about the Myanmar military's propaganda, I think I'd be able to read between the lines. If I'm able to do it, then 100% you're able to do it. Suchi's able to do it. So I think there will be a good idea in Suchi's mind about what's happening. Um, and then also about global events as well, because those papers carry wire stories about issues like Ukraine and Gaza. He's aware of what's happening in the world as well. And then Sean said that information seeps through in other ways as well, like through staff, etc. So yeah, she's aware. Now, like the question is, now she's aware, we know she's aware, what's her stance on the revolution? Because if his stance was, I want people to put down their guns and then let's do another election, let's just have peace and I won't even be in the election, then surely the military would have released her by now. They tried to get two NLD representatives to coax her to kind of change her stance. So all of this suggests, this is me speculating, all of this suggests to me that she will not tell people to put their guns down, basically, and that she won't speak out against this armed uprising. That's just my speculation on it. What do you think?
I mean, I think that because of the newspaper being delivered to her, that's one of the ways she can get access. But also from Sean's book, I noticed that he said that when he was taken into insane prison, but before actually being in the prison, he was in an interrogation room. And as he was there, he could hear the protester chanting and marching outside the walls. And that really gave him chills. And also the banging of the pots and pans, if you remember at the beginning of the coup. So those are information that you get from outside the walls, even though you don't get really been talked to that way. So if Sean is hearing that, I could imagine Dasu probably has a similar sense. So at the beginning of it, it probably has more of those sounds and feedbacks from people. And inside the prison too, I don't know if she is in isolation because we don't know where she is or what, but I could imagine the military might want to talk to her. I mean, if they could get her vote of confidence in some ways in proceeding for the election, that's always a good thing for them, right?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I think about the prospect of people chanting or shouting and Suu Kyi, that being audible to Suu Kyi, perhaps like closer to the coup and when Sean Turnell was in the same prison. But I don't think that that's much of a prospect anymore. It does seem that she's being kept. There's rumors that she's being kept now on a military base. But Sean did say, and I think that this is reasonable, information might seep in through other ways as well, through staff, through, I don't know, like random interactions that she might have. Um, and so yeah, I think that that'll play a part in it. But we talked about her health earlier on. Now she's 80, and even though she doesn't seem, based on those logs in 2024, she doesn't seem to be like on death's door. There is a chance that she'll die in prison. Because she's not getting proper medical care, and she is an elderly person now. So if she does die, I think it's going to pretty much erupt around Myanmar again if she dies in custody. And I think that that's becoming more of a possibility, the longer that this goes on. And again, just based on some of the interviews for that article and talking to Sean as well, a lot of people believe that that'll be the moment that pushes people over the edge again. But I don't know. Do you think that that might ignite protests again, or do you think people would be too afraid to come outside because of what the soldiers did last time?
I feel like that, I mean, I think it's not in the military's interest to have her die under their custody because that would make her a martyr, just like her father. But her father was a soldier, so that's a different case. But for her to be at old age, be imprisoned again, and to die, to have blood on their hands like that would cause a a big tsunami of reaction around the anybody who's remotely interested in Myanmar. So of course the Myanmar people would be definitely be. I feel like that would be a lot of storming the streets, or something's gonna happen. But and because of that, I think that's why I asked you whether this could be planted by the military, or is this the look into her life could be the sign of life that the military is trying to show to the public that, hey, look, she is sleeping, eating, and meditating, reading newspaper. This is the sign of life that she still exists, because we don't know if she is alive right now. That's the truth. And we we hope to see her. We send her wishes for her birthday. And the fact of the matter is we don't know where she is and how she is doing. So the possibility of her death in prison is still there, and the election being this close, I don't know if the military would want the news out, even if she's not doing well in prison. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. If she's very ill at the moment, I think they'd want to keep that under wraps. Apparently, when that story came out, I was told that they actually had a meeting, that the junta had a meeting about it, um,
Yeah.
which was a bit worrying because I was thinking, what if they go on a hunt for the sources? Yeah, I think that if there was a possibility that she was very ill right now, they wouldn't want that coming out. But I think when it comes to Suu Kyi, it's very difficult to keep things like that a secret because the staff who can bring her the newspapers and her food,
Mm-hmm.
I think that it would just come out. I think that one of them would talk about it.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult to imagine it not kind of like trickling through the cracks in one way or another.
Yeah. So we're gonna assume that she is alive and she is getting some form of information about the outside world. The is her release, you think, is still on the table? You think that is still a bargaining chip? You know, the days leading up to the election, I guess like months, leading up to the election. Do you think that's still a possibility?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think they're going to release her before the election. I think that if Min Aung Hlaing is able to pull off a bogus election and consolidate his political control in Myanmar, then he might use Suu Kyi's release as a means to, once that's happened, as a kind of as a bribe, to say, hey, if you help
Mm-hmm.
me do this, then I'll release Suu Kyi when she's 85 or something, and then maybe by that time she'll just sit out of politics, or she might not have the energy left to get back, or maybe she will. I don't know. Um, that's a fascinating thing, is that this story is nowhere near over yet, and the story of her life is not even over, and she's past 80 now, and you know arguably this is the most kind of, I say fascinating. I mean, it's very horrible that she's in prison, but
Mm.
it's just a really fascinating life that she's led, and that she's over 80 now,
Yeah.
and that this is like another incredibly fascinating chapter of her life. As I say that as an outsider who's not actually in prison, but just as an observer to it. But I don't know. I don't think Men Online will release her before the election. Maybe at some
Mm.
point after. The military, like Men Online, you know, obviously they'll only do something if it benefits them. So I think that's probably why they're keeping her in jail, because at some point they think they might be able to use her. If they can, they'd be happy, I think,
Yeah.
to let her languish in the cells. But if they could use her and then kind of control the result, then they might do that.
I want to go back to talking about how we even got into this situation in the first place. The coup that happened in 2021 with Aung San Suu Kyi ending up in jail. Before then, she was no longer the sweetheart in international media, international community, based on her stance with the or against the Rohingya Muslim population. Because of her decision to appear before the courts at The Hague and somehow representing, or some would even say defending, the military's action, she kind of fall from grace, to say, from the international community. So when the coup happened, the tragic thing that I heard some people talk is like, oh, only when the majority Bama population get hit by violence that now you care, but before, when it was the Rohingya and the minority population, you didn't care. So that was one of the narratives I heard, but it definitely, when it comes to Myanmar's history and politics, the word we repeatedly use is complicated. It is not black and white. It's not like you deserve this because you didn't stand up, or it's nobody deserved this kind of atrocity. But do you think that the when the coup happened, because because the coup happened in 2021 after the 2017 Rohingya crisis has somewhat evolved, and the narratives from the international media, international community has kind of lost sympathy towards Myanmar. Do you think that has a lot to do with what happened after the coup? That nobody really was there to jump in to help per se. Because a lot of Myanmar people who protest were like, "Oh, UN save us, US save us," but other than statements, we don't really get that much action.
Mm. Yeah, I don't think anybody could have done anything anyway, unless there was an outside country that took military action, which is never going to happen. If
Mm-hmm.
people were calling for a UN force to come in, it's never going to happen. There were some Myanmar people who knew it would never happen at that time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, yes, her image. There's an attempt to kind of rehabilitate her image internationally at the moment, which is much easier to do when she's held incommunicado and a military prisoner. Um, but just a year before the coup, she was in the Hague defending the military against genocide allegations. And these were allegations of mass killings, torture, sexual violence, expulsion of the Muslim Rohingya in Rakhine, made at the International Court of Justice. It's like serious. Obviously, you can't really get more serious than that. And
Mm-hmm.
it was such a shock to the world who knew Aung San Suu Kyi and Myanmar on a more surface level to see the same human rights icon who'd endured so much suffering under the hands of the military, now stood of her own volition, abetting the persecution of one of the world's most vulnerable peoples. You know, she sat through all of those accounts and then stood up and basically did defend the military. She also said that if violations had occurred during the so-called clearance operations of the Rohingya, that Myanmar's judicial system would handle them. I mean, really, Myanmar's judicial system is going to handle the military violations in Rakhine. I mean, that's the same institution that would jail her within a year for owning unlicensed walkie-talkies. Um,
Yeah.
so people say, "Oh no, Aung San Suu Kyi was playing this cerebral game with the military and Min Aung Hlaing, and it was all a ploy to kind of to change the military drafted constitution, and so she wanted to get ahead of the military by defending them. So there's a lot of speculation you can make about what her motivation was to do that. On the other hand, people said, well, she doesn't believe the Rohingya belong in Myanmar, and
Mm.
that's also a fairly simple but good explanation that she doesn't believe that these people should be there in the first place. So yeah, there was a lot of different ways of explaining. We don't know. We just don't know. We don't know, I guess, what her real motivation was. I mean, if we wanted to take it at the most kind of simple level, based on the interviews that she gave to international media around that time as well, we would say that she doesn't believe the Rohingyas are citizens, and she has different
Mm.
standards to them. She applies different standards to them than she does to other nationalities living in Myanmar. But at that time of the Rohingya campaign, the military campaign against the Rohingya, everybody felt like I was there in Yangon, and everyone felt, well, if Aung San Suu Kyi is under attack, I'm also under attack as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they were. It wasn't like the international community was blaming the military because Aung San Suu Kyi decided to go to The Hague and defend them. So millions, especially in the Burma majority heartlands, were just kind of foaming with this nationalist fervor of, you know,
Mm.
attacking us. Myanmar was being ganged up on. The Rohingya are illegal immigrants and they're liars. At that time, Suu Kyi's Facebook page, or not her page, but her ministry, government ministries page, even
Mm-hmm.
one Rohingya woman's testimony as fake rape, like quotes fake rape.
Mm.
You know, I went to some of those rallies for Suu Kyi, and there was lots of Suu Kyi sashes and people singing the national anthem. And waving Myanmar flags, and there was a billboard showing Suu Kyi with 3 smiling generals. That really symbolized the kind of jarring military alignment. But
Mm.
there were a small group of people who put a stand up and said that in the middle of the rally, they said that they urged people to reflect on the Rohingya's plight. They stood up for the Rohingya. They set up a stand. I saw them. I was so impressed
Mm.
because it takes such courage to do that in that environment. And they evoked the Suu Kyi of 2012, who spoke in her noble speech about, quotes, the seeds of conflict born from ignored suffering. She said during her own house arrest, she had, quotes, drawn strength from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And
Mm.
she was a big advocate for saying that rights should be protected by the rule of law. But at the ICJ, she told people that it's a complex situation, which it is, but then also it isn't, right? Like, Myanmar is very complex. The Rohingya issue is very complex. But then there's also a point where it's like, but it's also wrong to do that as well, right? It's also not complex enough for it to be a kind of complete mystery. People can understand it. So you can't just say onlookers to have just misunderstood. Um, so I think that's going to be a really complicated part of her legacy. And
Mm.
as I said, there is a effort to rehabilitate her image. I I find her a very fascinating human being. I do think she's very intelligent and very kind of complicated in her own way and flawed as well. I do think she should have spoke out for the Rohingya. Um, but people see things through like a one-dimensional lens, like the Westerners who looked at the transition of Myanmar to a democracy when she was in charge. They packaged Aung San Suu Kyi's story in a very one-dimensional way. It was there was this woman standing up against this evil military. Well, they are evil. I agree with that. They are an evil military, but there was this woman who was standing up against this dictatorship and like flying the flag of freedom and democracy, and she was very articulate and she was very beautiful, and she stood for what was right and she put her life on the line, and
Mm.
those things are kind of true as well. So that's why, but in the Western view of that, that's why people were so shocked when she went to the Hague, because actually many people didn't bother to really think or research about what the dynamics were in Myanmar and her own background and her own views as well. So it didn't come as a big shock to many ethnic minorities, but it came as a big shock to some Westerners. They were looking at it through a very one-dimensional lens, as were the flag-waving demonstrators at that protest in Yangon when they were waving the flag for Suu Kyi at the Hague. They also were looking at it through a one-dimensional lens as well. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think Aung San Suu Kyi really disguised who she was. If you look closely enough, I think she's always
Mm.
been like a Burmese nationalist and a politician, the daughter of the founder of the military. That's
Mhm.
that's who she is.
I think it's the discrepancy between what the international narrative of her, like the icon that is she, and what she represents versus the domestic politics and domestic nature of how the citizen of Myanmar view her. Right? Like, so from the West, they have always propped her up as like her versus the big bad wolf, basically, with the military. And she is the icon of the kindness, courage, and, she stand up for human rights issues and all of that. But, in the retrospect, like you said, she is a nationalist through and through. And I don't think she ever hid the fact that she has always been a politician. And she is actually, with her campaign, when with her narrative, and around the time that she went to The Hague, um, she's actually campaigning for her own election that's coming up in 2020. So she needs the majority Bama vote. The nationalism, I feel like, still needs to be in play because, Rohingya are not even the majority of the voting population. So I don't think she was paying that much attention to international media in that sense, or the narrative that she was being seen, because she's like, if I think I'm doing the right thing, this is a misunderstanding that they will come to see the light of day eventually. That's my understanding. And now when she is in prison, we are back to the familiar narrative of bad military, good Aung San Suu Kyi in prison.
Yeah.
But it is never that simple. And now, I mean, the Rohingya issue is stunted. Now they're like, more and more people are in refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, and there's no repatriation. There's no moving forward. I know that the NUG included Rohingya crisis to be resolved in their constitution. Um, so do you think she would have wanted the NUG, or the members of the NUG who were very close with her, and to continue with Rohingya in this direction that they have now?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I can't speak for because I'm not in her mind in that respect. So
Yeah.
I think that she's quite a practical person. So I mean, appealing to change the citizenship law and to be more inclusive of the Rohingya is, if you're going to look at it in a kind of cynical way, it's a good ploy to try to get Western international support for the resistance. Whether the people actually believe it or not, whether those politicians believe that or not, is another question. But I mean, if Aung San Suu Kyi thought that it was going to help her cause, the cause of democracy in Myanmar, then yeah, I think she'd be more open to doing that. Again, I mean, I can only speculate on that.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned earlier about the resistance and Suu Kyi and her kind of impact on the resistance if she was released. Um,
Mm.
well, that's one thing that we've really noticed actually since the coup, is that the resistance are lacking a leader. It's the most obvious thing about the resistance, right? The absence of a leader is deafening in the resistance, and it needs one now more than ever. Suu Kyi's always been that leader, the kind of lighthouse of democracy and hope and guidance. And that's something that the resistance don't have at the moment. People could say, oh, maybe that's a good thing because now there's more like local leaders of various ethnic communities. But I think that it probably needs a one leader at the moment to lead at least a majority of it, to be more cohesive and to give something to the world to communicate with, someone to communicate with. That's actually the thing. Suu Kyi would be really good as being the bridge between Myanmar and the international community, especially given her background, and she lived abroad for so long. Um, and I think that that's what the resistance needs, is someone like that. I hope that she's released. She doesn't deserve to be in prison, really, because you know she just shouldn't. She shouldn't be in prison. She should for like
Yeah.
for walkie talkies or whatever. They're bogus charges, and I hope that she's released and she's able to speak
Hmm.
and write about her motivations and about why she did that at the Hague and what she was thinking. And like, I hope she can
Hmm.
and write honestly about that, because it would be really interesting to know.
You
Oh,
say that the resistance needs a leader, right? Like, could the NUG leadership could be a stand-in in some ways?
I don't see anybody in the NUG being capable enough to lead the resistance. Um, Suu Kyi for all her faults, and she does have many faults, she is like a very strong leader for Myanmar. She's adored by Myanmar. Um, you know, you mentioned about the election earlier as well,
Mm-hmm.
and that she was playing for the domestic audience. I agree. I think she was playing for the domestic audience by going to The Hague, but she didn't really need to either. She already had their support. She was so beloved. She is so beloved by Myanmar,
Mm-hmm.
the Burma majority, that she didn't need necessarily to go to The Hague to get that vote and to win the election. If she didn't go to The Hague, she still would have won the election anyway. And she had the moral authority to speak out for the Rohingya, and that many Burma people, I believe, would have followed her, or would have at least been encouraged to question their own views on the Rohingya and why they think like that, because they've been exposed for so long to various propaganda as well.
Right, like you said, it's unlikely that she probably wouldn't be released before the election, and NLD party is dissolved, and going into the election, then there are some revolution fighters, PDF or other armed organizations in the areas where the military poll stations might be. And this election, yes, it will be rigged. It will be supposedly biased and to some extent, but they still need to have this show of people going and voting and collecting votes, the logistic of it's still going to happen in some ways. And do you think there will be violence or some kind of instability around the days of the election? I mean, I'm worried. I'm asking because you meet a lot of people on the ground and revolution and resistant fighters. And is there a plan leading up to the election? Is the election going to change their way of doing things, the battles that they're fighting?
I think that this election has the potential to be one of the bloodiest so-called votes in modern history. The military are trying their best to claw back as many towns as possible. So we're already seeing violence ahead of the election, an intensification of violence. There's been violence since the coup, but we're seeing an intensification of violence in many places now as the military tries to claw back control over these places that have been liberated by resistance groups. So, absolutely, I think it's going to be a horribly violent vote if they go ahead with it. Not only in the resistance, the military aren't going to be able to hold elections in resistance areas. They're just not going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the people who are involved in the vote counting will probably be targeted, as well as the soldiers who are guarding them, because they need to go into a liberated area, and to do that, you have to pass like 4, 5, 6, 7 checkpoints. They just wouldn't make it. They wouldn't make it into the towns that have been liberated in the first place. I think the violence will come from the military-controlled areas because it's harder for a Myanmar military soldier to infiltrate a liberated area and attack the resistance.
Mm.
It's easier for a resistance fighter to penetrate the military controlled areas and launch attacks from inside military territory. So I think that the violence will come from military controlled areas if they push ahead with the so called vote.
Mm.
And civilians, I think, will be killed as well. It's really that's
Yeah.
horrible to say, but I think that it's gonna there's gonna be bombs and there's gonna be assassinations. People are going
Yeah.
to be afraid to vote. They might get forced by the Myanmar military to vote. It's absolutely crazy that they're pushing ahead with it. I mean, Min Aung Hlaing wants it to consolidate his power and to show their political control and to have something to wave in front of leaders of other countries to say, look, it's over now. I'm the president. But
Mm.
the price that's going to cost for a fake vote, I mean, it means absolutely nothing. The results of this vote will just go down in history as just like a kind of half a sentence of, oh yeah, and that was the result of the so-called election. Like the vote's not going to mean anything at all. The result isn't, and it's going to cost so much in blood. But we've already seen Min Aung Hlaing is happy to do that, because we've seen from the coup, unless he's he's much more stupid than we even thought that he was. The fact that he pulled off the coup, and they're still in control now,
Mm-hmm.
but he knew as a result of the coup, he probably did know that there would be such a pushback and that it would escalate and evolve into something that it is today. But he still went ahead with it anyway and did it. Again, with Min Aung Hlaing, I don't know what he's thinking.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad not to be inside his head as well. But it's hard to imagine him planning to be anything else but the boss in a future Myanmar. I believe he wants to jet set around the world as the leader of Myanmar, and he loves that international recognition. He really bathes in the adulation of that kind of being the face of a country, the leader of a country. And I've heard from a source that the military people around him really want the election as well. But I hear that
Mm.
they won the election just so that they can get rid of him, so that he's not chief commander anymore, and they can kick him out of the military, so that he can be the smug president instead of actually being involved in military operations. Because as you probably know, there's been a lot of disillusionment and disappointment with Min Aung Hlaing as a military leader inside the
Mm.
military.
Yeah, the rumors of internal coup circulated, I think, a few months or a year ago, and the possibility of her like giving him up to for the military to survive. So he is the face of the atrocities that military has done. So what if we replace him, or like we, as in like the military, replace him? That is a possibility, but with the election going forward, it seems like he is trying to secure his position to be the supreme leader forever, like Putin or Xi Jinping. Um, with that's my guess as on why he would want to push on with the election. And I think Myanmar people are also put in the tough position of being forced to vote, or like I think because they came to people's houses and took census of how many people are in the house, and it serves two purposes, right? One, preparation for the election, and another, checking if young enough people are around to be put into military, like conscription laws. um, that went around, and it's still going to happen with the election and with the resistance force. I keep saying resistance force, but because it's like different groups, right? They're not like all united under one leader. Like you said, it needs a leader into pushing forward, but all that they can agree on is they don't want military rule. So the election is going to go forward in the same way as the resistant fighters are going to keep trying to gain control of many lands. But can we actually say how many percentage of the country is controlled by the military and the rest by the resistant forces? But when we say resistant forces, they're not all one versus against the military, right? So different areas are controlled by that. So I guess what we can really count is how much of the land is under military control to even set up polling stations.
Yeah, and there's a lot of in between as well, contested territories where
Mm-hmm.
there might be a presence of a resistance force as well as a military presence, which will be the most dangerous place to be in the election. Yeah, so the territorial situation is back and forth more than ever now. I think today, actually, I read that the TNLA have just lost some territory in northern Shan to the military, but that the
Mm.
Arakan army has gained some in Rakhine, and that the Karen have gained some. So it's in a state of flux. You mentioned about Min Aung Hlaing being like the president, the eternal leader, like
Mm-hmm.
Putin. Yeah, I think so as well. I think that he really wants that more than anything. Is
Mm.
just to be respected by the world in that way. But the reason why the military want him, I've heard anyway, from a
Mm.
source that there are elements in the military who want to have him in that position so that he doesn't interfere in military operations because they believe that they'll be more competent in military operations. So that doesn't mean that like him being president doesn't necessarily mean that like there will be a de-escalation of conflict. It might mean that there'll just be a much more capable general or commander who will take his place, and that the violence will continue or escalate. And I think that Min Aung Hlaing is kind of assessing the global political situation, and he kind of sees which way the wind is blowing at the moment, and it's a good time to try to become a dictator and find international recognition and acceptance in that role as well. So I think the military, the resistance, as you mentioned, like the movement itself is so fractured and disparate, and everybody has their own agendas and interests. There's so many different groups, different acronyms. Actually, on my Substack, an analyst friend of mine wrote about this recently, about that being a huge problem in the resistance. Um,
Mm.
is that it's not the worst. This kind of fractured Myanmar is probably better than an endless military dictatorship, and hopefully it will evolve. If it does get fractured into several countries, hopefully it will evolve in a more peaceful and better way. The revolution is far from over, and also the Myanmar military still control significant territory. I'm not sure about the percent. The lowest percent I've seen is 25, I think, 25% that the military controls, but I think it's more than
Mm.
that. And I think it's difficult to kind of to guess at these things. But they're backed by China and Russia. Min Aung Hlaing is getting more international recognition. The resistance talks are stalling. There's so many different parallel initiatives that are running next to each other, and people are talking about different things. The aim has always been democratic federalism. What do you want to be? We want to be a federalist democracy. But actually, and this is what my friend was writing about as well, what appears to be taking shape is more like confederalism with a very weak central government and then the power residing in the local entities, the ethnic entities, which I think would be that would be like a great thing for Myanmar compared to the alternatives. But to get there, there's so many people doing their own thing. There's like so many different committees doing various constitutions, and I won't get too boring with the nitty gritty of it. But the National Unity Consultative Council, the NUCC, that was meant to
Mm.
bring together all of these diverse interests and diverse actors, and then create consensus decisions, and then they would guide the parallel government, the National Unity Government, the NUG, which had a lot of public support after the coup, and it framed itself as Myanmar's legitimate government. But it hasn't worked. The NUCC is very dysfunctional. Nobody can agree on everything, on anything. Everybody wants to be the boss, Um, that's also what my friend was saying as well. It's that problem where everybody wants to be the leader, so that they just go set up a group so that they can be the leader of that, and it doesn't really help the wider picture then.
Mm.
So yeah, the resistance are quite fractured. The political landscape is a bit fractured. People are doing their own thing. I think there are things to feel more optimistic about, and at least
Mm.
it's moving. At least there's actually like something happening, because the alternative could be nothing's happening at all, and then that'll put people in a very difficult position. But
Yeah.
the resistance really needs to get their act together. If they, the TNLA lost that territory.
Yeah.
They might not have lost that territory if there was more stronger military alliances. And then, like with the military alliances, you need political alliances to have trust in those as well. There's a very prominent activist who I don't think has been on this podcast before, but maybe I'm wrong. But if he hasn't, it would be great if you guys could get him one day.
Mm,
Taser San,
mm,
Taser San travels around the resistance-held areas. He's been doing that since the coup, and he published a piece. So he posted a piece on Facebook recently, really criticizing the NUG and saying that it's they just they've squandered the public support. They failed to build a effective military chain of command. Failed to rein in the PDFs who are committing crimes under their command. Failed to utilize the budgets and the resources.
mm.
Many of the ministers and deputy ministers still live abroad. And simply, he said, they don't have the capacity to lead this revolution. So we need change and we need it now. And the NUG told me earlier in the year in an interview that they were actually going to change, but it still hasn't happened yet. So you can feel
Mm.
these frustrations really boiling to the surface. And politically, we're going to see more and more of that, and people scrambling for a solution now that the military is pushing ahead with the election. So I guess that's a plus side about the election, is that it's kicking people up the ass on the resistance sides to say, hey, we need to put something together to present to the world right now, because the military are going to do this before us, and that's really going to set us back. So it is kind of like acting as a catalyst for resistance politics as well.
Yeah, we've been talking about the speculations from the outside of what it's going to be like, what it might be, what Myanmar would think, what Aung San Suu Kyi would think. But I want to ask you about more on the ground level, since you are in different areas. Since you left Myanmar since the coup in 2021, obviously you can't really go back in to an airport. But I know that you've been to many different ethnic controlled areas, different liberated area to, following on your Substack on Myanmar. I learned a few of that. And I want to ask you the situation on the ground, like tell me more about the battles that you have witnessed in terms of like when you went in and talked to people and especially in the border region.
Mm. Yeah, I've been very lucky to go in several times to Myanmar in the east and the west to see the situation on the ground, and every situation is different. The dynamics of that place are different as well. So the most recent one was Chin State. Before that, it was Tananthari a couple of times, and Karen and Karani. And the people who I meet on the ground, it's people are getting very tired in many places. They're facing these military blockades, and the price of everything from a bottle of water to a snack or to like oil and rice is so more expensive than it used to be in Yangon when I was there, but also now as well. Uh, Even Yangon is more expensive now, but the resistance areas are pricier to live in, and the people there don't have jobs. Many of them don't because they can't get job opportunities there. Uh, they've also have to face like the constant threat of airstrikes, and they've lost many of them, young people and older people who return to their homes have lost limbs because of landmine explosions um, when they go back to check their house or something like that. Every day is like full of random dangers like that for people there. So yeah, people are getting very tired, but there are more dominant groups which are rising to the surface now and kind of taking control over various places in Chin State, in Karenni, and in others like that. Usually, like younger groups, like millennial-led groups with Gen Z fighters. So yeah, I mean Myanmar's landscape. I mean, most people who listen to this will be familiar with Myanmar, but if you're not, it's such an extraordinary country. It's such a beautiful country. And in the west, there are big green mountains bordering India, and that's a predominantly Christian place. And it gets quite cold there sometimes, and it's stunning. And you get many different dialects and tribes there. And then if you move north to that, you get into the more kind of very wild places of Nagaland, which is also next to India. going around the mountains to China and then mountains around Thailand. These are all the predominantly Christian ethnic minorities who the British colonial government wanted to work with so that they could alienate the Burma and better kind of keep control over the country. Um, so yeah, all of these places have very different geographies, different vibes, different groups. Like sometimes a dozen or so different groups working in the areas. The only real common thread is that people are just like they've just suffered so much mentally and physically. They're totally exhausted, and they kind of really need change. They need positive change there.
The resistance trying to take control of different areas, right? You said that about 25% of the Myanmar landscape is controlled by military, a bit more or less around that time, around that amount, judging from how much control they might have for the polling stations. But I know that like day to day, there are different cities that are being taken by different groups, and a lot of people are being internally displaced. And tell us more about the recent victories or in terms of battles that you have witnessed in different cities.
Yeah, the 25% was something that I read, and I think it was 25%. I'd need to check that, but I believe it's more. I think the military are. I don't want to guess a percent, but I think it's more than 25.
Mhm.
The battles. Well, there was one in Falam in Chin State earlier in the year, which was successful for a group called the CNDF. They liberated their capital. That the Falam is like this kind of spiritual and tangible capital. That's everything for them, and they liberated that. So that was a major deal for the Chin resistance. But there's always a but with Myanmar. But after we left, they started to fight each other. The CNDF, which is part of the Chin Brotherhood Alliance, and the CNF, which is part of the Chinland Council. They started to the smaller groups on the Chinland Council side started to fight with the CNDF. I won't get into that too much because it's a very long story, but
Mm.
basically, there's always been tension there between these two sides, and there was hopes that it was going to be resolved, but there was an eruption of outbreak of violence recently between the sides. Now that seems to have calmed down, and the public reaction was so strong to the violence, the inter-Chin violence. It was such a strong reaction of people saying, "We do not want you to do this. We do not want you to fight each other. If you're going to fight the Myanmar military." And it seemed to work. And within a few days, they so far have seemed to reach a resolution. So anyway,
Mm.
hopefully that'll be okay. But Falam, yeah, was a big victory. That was the last kind of big victory that I've seen. I haven't been like if I go into Myanmar, I'm not a frontline junkie at all. I don't like find the craziest looking guy and be like, take me to the front. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm not like that at all because I'm a bit cowardly as well. So I'd rather just go around the villages and go around the internally displaced camps and talk to people, interview as many people as I can, and then go to any liberated villages or towns, and then just get a feel for what life is like there. And then, sometimes I have to go to the front line because you have to go to the front line to get to another place, or there's like a really good story on the front line, so you say, I'm gonna go there. But I try not to hang around there for too long. The trouble is
Yeah.
that the military uses a lot of drones these days, and obviously fighter jets. So sometimes the front line can be anywhere as well.
I want to go back to your point about the inter-Chin violence. I haven't heard much about it. So while they were CNDF is fighting off the military, you said that they are within the Chin state. There are different camps that are fighting against each other.
Yeah, within Chin State, there are two major camps of the resistance that fighting against each other. And this isn't a new thing. they've got like long, deep roots in kind of tribal and territorial differences. So recently there was an outbreak of violence between the Chinland Council member, the CNF, and a smaller member, and the CNDF in Falam. Basically, from what I gather, the CNDF, they took a border town which was in control of a Chinland Council member was in control of a very important border town between India and Myanmar called Rikodor, and
Mm-hmm.
the CNDF took that town from them. So, as a kind of reprisal, the CNF, which is a member of the Chinland Council, took the headquarters of the CNDF. I know there's like so many acronyms, and I know it gets
Yeah.
a bit complicated, but when we boil it down, it's about control and power and this changing environment where everyone thinks, oh, maybe this is my moment to gain control of the state and to lead the future of the state. So there's a bit of gambling going on, and there's a bit of maneuvering going on. But unfortunately, in that case, it led to violence, and at least 3,000 people fled across the border into India, and a civilian drowned in the border river, and
Wow.
resistance fighters died fighting each other,
Mm.
which is really tragic. Yeah, so from what I gather, though, the situation's been resolved somewhat, and the town has been handed back to the Chinland Council member and the
Mm.
CNDF headquarters, which I've been to. I've been to those headquarters with some CNDF commanders. Um, that's been handed back to the CNDF. So yeah, the resistance obviously hope that it won't break out again, and there needs to be a political solution. There needs to be the two sides in agreement, and there's bad blood. There's really bad blood between the sides, but they need to sit down and draw up a political agreement because they are from one kind of Chin family and one bigger Myanmar family as well. And I do think that they're going to find a way around it, but there's a chance it could break out again.
So this is within the state, Chin state itself, that there might be a talk of um separatism, perhaps, like, your
Well,
group versus my group. But then, like, is there a talk of like other ethnic groups that don't want to be part of the Myanmar, or like doesn't share the federal union of Myanmar dream?
I think that the Arakan army probably want to be independent,
Mm,
or they might want to be, as I mentioned earlier on, which my friend wrote about, a confederal basically union. So everyone is basically independent, but chooses to be part of this federation of ethnic states. I think that
mm,
that's a possibility. When you meet the young guys who are fighting, young men and women on the ground, they want to be independent, but they're young as well, and they're like they've been raised in the shadow of the Myanmar military with this sense of oppression all their lives, and they see this as the opportunity to finally break away from that. And the simple goal that they reach for, which is totally understandable, is that to stop this oppression, we'll be independent. But what that actually means is not realistic, right? It's for many places, it's just kind of the goal that they aim for. And if they keep on fighting in that direction, they hope, or I hope as well, that eventually things will kind of sort themselves out. And maybe there will
mm,
be a federation of ethnic states, even if there's one Burma majority state and then like a kind of belt of ethnic states. If the violence dies down and then there's like several independent countries, I think that they'll inevitably have to join up in one way or another economically in the future. So like then the realities would hit home as well. But I don't know. I'm an observer. I'm an outsider. I wish the best for all of the people who are fighting for democracy, and if they're fighting for independence, I wish them the best for that as well. I really hope that it works out. As a journalist, you're meant to be objective, but actually, I mentioned that. I'm going to digress a lot here. I'm sorry. I mentioned that before
go for it.
when I was talking to Joa. um, about objectivity in journalism, and I said to him that there's no such thing as objectivity. But I kind of thought it sounded smart. I thought, oh, maybe I'll just say that because it sounds like quite smart. And then after I said it, I thought, oh, that's actually a terrible thing for a journalist to say, right? Because anybody who like the very few people who read my articles, hello, mum, they're not, they're going to doubt my authenticity or doubt my honesty, right? If I start saying there's no such thing as objectivity. So I felt really like self-conscious about that. But actually, maybe I'm trying to justify myself here. I really believe there's no such thing as objectivity because I tested it on myself and I was like, did I really mean that? And yeah, I think I do mean that. Like when I go to a Myanmar liberated area, or if any reporter goes anywhere on a field trip, and you write these maybe 1,200 word dispatches, you're basing that on what you perceive, what you take from the environment and from the people you meet. And naturally, you only pay attention to the things that catch your attention. And the things that catch your attention are very subjective in their essence anyway. So if you go to, let's say, if you go to Karenni State, and I go to Karenni State, and we're both asked to write 1,000 word dispatches, we're going to come out with very different things because it's subjective in the way that we see what's going on around us. We'll probably both come out saying, the military's terrible because that's just a kind of reality, right? They're killing civilians.
That's the baseline.
Yeah,
right?
and I mean that's undeniable reality. They are terrorizing civilians through sophisticated weaponry and many other means. But then what we make out of the people we meet and their stories and what we're attracted to in those environments, that will be subjective. And then our conclusions might be a bit different and subjective. So even though it will be presented in a newspaper as objective, it is a subjective process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally understand. I was a journalist with Voice of America for about 10 years, and it is hard for me to not have feelings or opinion on it. But you have to remember that we're not activists, right? Like, although the thing is, what you meant by there's no such thing as objectivity. Like, I know, I get what you mean, but also I know it sounds really odd coming out of the mouth of a journalist for the listeners and for the audience and people who read your work. But I think what you meant is it's hard to not be biased. Like, pre-existing bias you have against this kind of violence that's happening to people, and especially you went to places and you talked to people who actually are living in war zones, and it is hard to deny the truth about which side is quote unquote bad or evil, and as an outsider you probably need to have a clear mind in the sense that you don't need to be you relate, but you can't put all of you in your story or the people in your story, or else you are digressing from your I guess purpose as somebody who is going to report back to people who are more on the outside, who don't see what you see or who don't hear what you hear. So I understand and relate to your struggle of thinking about objectivity in terms of a journalist. It is definitely hard, like in all my previous work, barely there are my opinions. Those are quotes from other experts and people who are on the ground, and only on this platform that a lot of my opinions are almost free flowing. And it is always really nice to talk to a fellow journalist. And I want to share my feelings about the coup right after the coup. So there has an immense feeling of survivor's guilt right after the coup, because I was and is in Washington, D.C., while other people are, my friends, my family, everybody that I knew are in Myanmar, trying to figure out what's going on. At the same time, we're trying to figure out what's going on outside from DC as well. And although I am Myanmar, I felt this feeling of an outsider looking in and watching on live feed of soldiers marching towards where my house is and having this kind of worries. I know it's a different kind of worry, that it's not comparable to what other people face on the ground, but it is from a perspective. And to have that, to watch these footages and to have the mind of objectivity while trying to do my profession, my training as a journalist, it was quite a struggle, and it's to remain objective, to not be angry about it, to not be emotional about it while I appear on television and reporting news in my mother tongue. And that probably is one of the hardest thing I had to do. And as you are a foreign journalist going into these places, talking to people, you are using your profession as a means to deliver, like amplify the voices that are not being heard. So I applaud you for the effort. And also you have so much experience, and you see things through different lens, since you were there since before the coup in 2017, working on progress and the future of the country, and all of that shut down in 2021, and you had to leave via the airport. And with that you have the ability to leave, but a lot of people probably don't have that choice, if you were a journalist in Myanmar. And I want to ask you about the day that you left Yangon via the Yangon International Airport. How was it? It's a country that you covered for many years, and what were the feelings around it? What was the mood around it?
Um, well, I would say first, I can only imagine what it's like to see our own country in that state. If I applied that to my own country, I can't even imagine actually what that would be like. So yeah, that's very difficult. I would say as well that for my coverage, I also report on the resistance and their various kind of crimes as well, or bad things that they've done, or the sensitive politics between groups. And I've been told off many times by resistance figures and warned about that as well sometimes. But if I'm not going to do that, then there's no point in me doing this whole thing in the first place. Like I don't see a point in it if I don't report on whatever I see and hear, and investigate things that I hear as well about the resistance as well as the military, which makes it even more difficult sometimes these days to go inside the country.
Mm.
Otherwise, what's the point in doing it in the first place? So I have to do that. So please believe in me, audience. I'm not lying to you. I'm not super subjective. A little bit, in a way that you're writing a feature and you're on a field trip, kind of
Mm.
assignment. But yeah, the last day in Yangon was a bit of a blur. Actually, everything just came to a halt when it became untenable to report there anymore. As a foreign reporter, there's no point in being in Yangon. Yangon is like not really where the story is to an extent, but anyone you talk to will just get arrested or into trouble. So it's you need to have. I don't know. I'd be curious about how to report in Yangon at the moment without getting people into trouble. I wouldn't risk it
Mm.
myself. When I left on that day, my friend Ryan, American businessman friend, got an aeroplane, not his, but he managed to organize a flight, not only for me, obviously, but for like hundreds of people out of Yangon. It was April the 8th, 2021. And so the flights had stopped, and there might not have been an opportunity to leave after that. So I got a ticket on that flight and then everything was a blur. There was a big queue outside of Yangon Airport. People had taken their pets away. Some people had sent their pets with like private drivers or like transport services across the Myanmar-Thailand border. Some of the pets died, sadly, in the cages.
Mm.
I mean, obviously, there's worse things that are happening in Myanmar now, but it's always good to add a little bit of tragedy, isn't it? Like, there's always so much of it. Um, yeah, so after I got on that plane, I got to Bangkok and I had to quarantine because it was during COVID. So I quarantined for like 10 days in a room. So that was quite good, actually. I had some time to decompress slightly and try to
Mm.
process things in that room. But, for me, I love Myanmar so much that, I know I'll go back there one day to Yangon. It's not, I didn't see it as this is the last time I'll ever see Yangon because I'll definitely go back there. It's
You and me both.
yeah,
We'll go there together. It's a
absolutely.
goal.
Yeah, yeah. We can get a drink of resistance made beer in
Yeah.
one of the bars in Sanchong or something. Yeah,
Mm.
so we'll be back. Yeah.
Yeah, I share that dream. And you mentioned that you met a lot of young fighters in the regions that you go to, like millennials and Gen Z fighters. What do they think about the future of the situation that it's gonna unfold with the elections too?
They, I mean, I think a lot of the fighters I meet, the ones who are more politically aware, understand that the country's in an absolute mess, and they're not super optimistic about the politics, but they're very focused on just fighting and getting rid of the Myanmar military in their areas. That's their immediate focus: is how do we get rid of that battalion that's still stuck up on that hilltop. So I think they just take it base by base and outpost by outpost. Others are in the jungle making drones and other weaponry. Um, and depending on, I guess, often the ethnicity of a person, uh, that depends on what they want the country to look like. But there is a consensus that democracy should come back. So, yeah.
Yeah. The also like in our previous conversation we had before the podcast, you mentioned about the um KNU's recent victories along the border. And can you tell me more about that in that sense? Like, with you have been to many different places and talked to different resistance fighters and also different ethnic resistance organizations or different groups. So when I forgot to mention that previously when we were talking about different victories, I wanted to ask you about that because they took Myawaddy before, if
Mm.
I remember correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
yeah.
No, you're right. They did. It was actually as soon as I'd returned from Tananthari and I was living in Mysore, a battle erupted over Myawaddy. So Myawaddy is one of Myanmar's biggest cities, actually, and it sits on the Thailand border. It was just opposite where I was living in Mysore, so
Mm,
you could hear the kind of fighting sometimes. And it was it was a different brigade of the KNU KNLA compared to Tananthari, and they had PDFs under their command, and they'd pushed out Burmese troops in the area. So the military responded predictably with airstrikes, and I climbed up on a roof with photographer Valeria Mongeli, and we watched the military just rain down bombs over Myawaddy, just a few hundred meters away from the border. And I mean, for decades, billions of dollars of trade, most of Burma and Thailand's overland trade has flowed through Myawaddy. So it was a huge victory for the resistance because the military were attacking with airstrikes, which means that the military have lost basically. Um, and it
mm,
was the biggest victory since Operation 1027, when the three major ethnic armies took so much of northern Shan in 2023. So, as usual with Myanmar and with conflicts in general, all sides were quite cagey about the casualty figures. But since the KNU had been pushing along Asia Highway 1 4 months earlier, dozens, maybe even hundreds of young Karen and PDF fighters, uh, boys and girls, young fighters had died to reach that moment, to finally capture Myanmar. It was a huge moment. In Myanmar, there was only a few soldiers of the Myanmar military left. It was the 275 battalion, I think, and they were hiding in bushes on one side of the river near Friendship Bridge 2. The Friendship Bridge 2, there's two bridges, and that one is a huge concrete structure used by trucks on the town's outskirts for import-export trade. So I went to that bridge. Under the Thai side of the bridge, I stood with an activist called Kong Kong, who'd quit Burmese military training a couple of years before and joined the resistance. He had one leg. He was making a bomb on the front line and it exploded. So he lifted his prosthetic leg into the back of the truck and he was calling out across the river for the Burmese soldiers to surrender their weapons to the KNU. But they didn't. They stayed quiet. And so Kong Kong was quite annoyed about that. And he was like, they only care about their own lives, their own skin. And then suddenly, while we were on the Thai side, 4 men climbed into the river on the Burma side. And I thought, oh my God, it's the soldiers, it's the Burmese soldiers who are surrendering and swimming across the river. So I was like, oh, now's the time for photos. And the Thai soldiers were eyeing them warily. And then one of these guys who climbed into the river was like, oh, we're just gas station workers. We've just come for a swim. And these guys must have been like totally petrified because they looked up and they saw like basically a Thai army battalion, some like Burmese activists, a few of them, looking very angry, a few of them missing limbs as well, and me, just random red-faced foreigner among them as well. And a few other foreigners. Valeria, the photographer, was there taking photos. So they must have been so confused. They were just like, we're just gas station workers. So after their swim, they yelled over to us because we looked very quizzical. And they were like, oh, the soldiers you're looking for, they've all separated. They're hiding near another part of the river. But as he was saying this gas station worker was like secretly gesturing that actually the soldiers were right behind him in the bush. So he was, so he was pointing his fingers like that at this bush really close by. And then the gas station workers basically like ran away. And so we were like, whoa. And then we waited there for, a while longer, but they didn't come. Some other Burmese like resistance and activist people had come there just to try to kind of basically insult the soldiers until they came out. But then in that area there was a big gunfight then, and those soldiers who remained, they had a gunfight with some PDF and KNU, and the stray bullets started to hit the Thai side. Like some bullets nearly hit our heads on some building material. So then we were like, okay, we're going to just get out of here. It's not worth the risk of staying around here. So the soldiers never came, though, across the river. They retook Myanmar, and the KNU basically allowed the Myanmar military-aligned border guard force to take control. So that infuriated PDF fighters. Many of their comrades had died trying to take that town. And the BGF, which is run by, many of your listeners will know, it's run by a local warlord called Chit Thu. He's, you want to Google that guy. He supplied the besieged soldiers and smuggled more Burmese troops into the town. So, why did the KNU just hand it over? It could have been secured, but it was also like could have sparked a kind of Karen fratricide as well, like a little mini Karen civil war between the BGF and the Karen, the KNU. Also, the KNU didn't seem prepared to administer the town either, and they claimed they didn't want to take it because it would be destroyed by airstrikes. But they knew who they were dealing with the BGF. I mean, the Chit Thu originally served in the KNU. And he's like distinguished himself among fierce competition as one of Myanmar's most untrustworthy gangsters. He's basically in control of Myanmar now, but there's still a Myanmar military element. And also, he's involved in the scam centers there, like the pig butchering
Mm,
operations, which are running rampant along the border. It's a huge criminal empire, which I'm sure you've spoken about before on this podcast.
yeah.
So, yeah, the KNU, I feel like they've gone back to the drawing board, and I've had a few conversations with them and with some others, and it seems like they just took it too quickly to know what to do with it, and they didn't have the staff to administer this major border between the two countries. They didn't have the support from Thailand to do it either. So they fumbled it a bit, and the PDF was so annoyed, and also like people who had lost, families who had lost their loved ones in that battle as well, and in the battles leading up to it. I met a PDF commander during that time in Mesot, and he was like, "This is meant to be a revolution. We'll let us PDF should just fight the BGF on our own. We can just do it by ourselves." So the KNU went back to the drawing board, and now they are systematically approaching it, military outpost by outpost and settlement by settlement along the Thailand-Myanmar border. They've been doing that.
Mm,
They've been doing that almost since Myanmar, that they've lost Myanmar, and they've made real progress. And this is something that I feel like your listeners should be aware of if they're not already. The KNU territory, as they call it, Kothule, the homeland of the Karen, is huge territory. It goes from all the way from the southern tip of Myanmar, all the way up to the border with Karenni State, so the border with northern Thailand. Um, and now they're just doing it very systematically and basically flushing out the Myanmar military outposts along the border. They've just taken a border town called Tiki, which is bordering Thailand's Kanchanaburi region. And their
mm,
strategy, I spoke to a senior KNU leader earlier today. He told me the strategy now is control the whole border. So basically, Thailand has to deal with the KNU then, because if they ever want trade with Myanmar again, like they have to talk to the legitimate authority who controls the ground, and that will be the KNU. So they're doing it really systematically, where they're not so much as going to Thailand saying, "Hey, please deal with us." We've got where this is our homeland. Instead, now they're just actually taking control very slowly and steadily of all of the border until Thailand doesn't really have a choice but to deal with them. And then the KNU will have to decide whether they should deal with the Myanmar military when it comes to trade, because trucks will have to pass through Myanmar military controlled areas to go into
mm,
play. They've taken like a lot of camps recently. They've taken some quite famous camps along the Thailand-Myanmar border. They've only got two more left in Kanchanaburi.
mhm.
One of them is quite a big one called Modong, which is also a big border trade place. So yeah, I think it's one to really keep an eye on is the KNU's kind of new strategy based on their bad experience in Myanmar. They will need to take Myanmar one day unless they make a deal with the BGF and leave them to control it. But this new strategy that they have seems to be really working. So it's interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah. With the KNU's new strategy in the Thailand border, is the Thailand political situation, the new situation with the shift in administration or the leadership, has impacted in terms of the border politics as well?
Yeah, I can't say too much about Thai politics, mainly because I don't know much about it.
Mm,
But I would say that based on my conversations with the KNU and others, it seems that arguably playing a bigger role are the Thai Myanmar military, the Thai military commanders and the Thai military presence on the ground, because they have a record of supporting the Myanmar military as like the two leaders of the military do. They like to do it military to military, and so if things are going to change on the ground between the border, from what I've been told, it's got more to do with the Thailand military than it has to do with the Thai politics. Even if a new Thai government came into power and said, okay, we're going to totally change our approach to the Myanmar border, that still might not change too much. It just depends about whether the Thai military is on board or not.
Mm. But you mentioned the scam centers in the border regions, right? Those are the ones that I think current United States administration, Trump administration, has some concern over. Other than that, I don't think any matters of international crisis or humanitarian issue is high on President Trump's agenda. I would say, if you've been following, you'll see that since the USAID has been dismantled, VOA, my previous organization, was next up. VOA is not completely dissolved yet, but it was reduced much fewer number of employee. And the next on the I guess like the hit list was the State Department recently has let go a lot of employees too. While all of this is happening, in the past few days or few weeks, United States wrote a letter addressing to Myanmar, addressing him as the commander in chief, regarding tariff issue. And the Myanmar and also wrote back thanking Trump for basically recognizing him. Since I'm in DC, as I'm just sitting in my Washington DC home office, reading articles, talking to experts, I'm seeing that people have been speculating whether this is like a recognition of the leadership of the country of Myanmar, right? Like, honestly, my prediction was like, before it was like the West and the rest of the world seemed to be really tired of the Myanmar issue and kind of want to move on. They were still wishy-washy about it. And although the elections might be rigged and there might be some kind of acceptance from the United States to recognize or move on, but this letter came out and it caused ripples among diaspora, at least from where I can reach. And I don't know whether that is the same kind of sentiment in the country or the revolution fighters. Are they aware of the situations that the United States make this kind of gesture, or what do they think?
Yeah, this is quite a recent development. I've spoken to a couple about it, and the sense just seems to be that they're pretty bemused and a bit confused because they thought, oh well, isn't the US meant to have sanctions on the Myanmar military? So why
Yeah.
is the Trump administration referring to Min Aung Hlaing as Your Honor or whatever he said? You know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I know, referring to him in flattering terms and recognizing him as
Yeah.
the leader when he's also got, like, why is he talking about tariffs when he's got sanctions on this country and on the military? It doesn't make any sense. But through that, though, to them, I think they've said that, well, because it's kind of ridiculous, they don't really think it's that serious. Um, it seems like a copy and paste job, send that letter out to as many leaders as possible and just forget about it. What's the atmosphere like towards Burma in DC? So, are many people actually aware about what's happening? And have you spoken to any people in the Trump administration about this? And do they have conflicted feelings about this letter?
Not particularly in terms of the letter, but the general mood in the Washington D.C. is that there are just one too many issues to deal with. And a lot of the international crises don't seem to benefit the United States, which is not really good in Trump's book as a businessman. So I think it could be a copy and paste job, but I'm sure somebody somewhere said that, but sir, they have a dictator, and he'd be like, so what? That's my understanding. So what? They still have to pay tax. We're still gonna write to them to figure out the tax deficit problem. So that's my speculation on that, because I don't see that many chatters about Burma issue being in the forefront of what Trump administration, they're not eager to fix any of that. But on the other hand, with Israel, Gaza issue, Palestine issue, and Trump also want to be nominated for Nobel Peace Prize for ending wars. He wants. I know for a fact that he would love that. So I think in the same breath as that, he want to end all wars, like Ukraine-Russia war. And with Myanmar issue, the understanding is that, oh, it's been going on for what, over 4 years? Hasn't it ended yet? Let me be the one to end. So possibly he is trying to reach out in that sense, like, why don't you all come to a negotiation at the table, and then after that you can start paying tax on United States import export products. So that is my understanding of the situation in Washington D.C. right now.
Yeah, I mean, it might mean like Burma might mean nothing to a lot of people there, but it's like a small. That might be a small thing, right? That letter to DC, that they wouldn't give it 5-second thought, but it's such a big deal when it lands in Min Aung Hlaing's lap, and for Burma,
Yeah.
it's amazing how it's such a relatively small thing for the US can be such a big thing for a country like Burma. But yeah, I agree. I think I would tell Donald Trump, if I was in the White House, if I could whisper something in his ear, I would say, if you want that Nobel Peace Prize, put your focus on Myanmar. Put everything on Myanmar, because you can change it. You can bring back democracy to me. How good would that be, right? Trump, bring back democracy to Myanmar. Get rid of this brutal regime, or make peace in whatever way you see fit. Just make peace and make sure that democracy comes back to Myanmar. And then, bam, there's your Nobel Prize out of nowhere. You focus in Gaza or Ukraine. You might not have heard of Myanmar/Burma before. Maybe you haven't been there. But if you get that Nobel Peace Prize, they'll build a statue of you in Naypyidaw.
Yeah, it might be a bit difficult because right now the D word, democracy, it's not really in favor in this administration, I would say. Because it's like Democrats, diversity, inclusion. The first thing that Trump cut was diversity, inclusion, scholarship given to Myanmar students. So the word democracy, although that's what America is supposedly stand for, I don't know. I'm not really optimistic. Living in DC, it's a little bit weird to see a lot of our friends in the administration losing jobs overnight, fired for no reason really. And then a lot of even when the earthquake was happening, people were on the ground from the United States and they got accidentally got the termination letter. That these blanket firing of thousands of federal employees are pretty. I don't know. It's very similar to the life that I grew up in Burma. What people are doing self censorship, and me, I'm the victim of one of those firing from Voice of America. I took a fork in the road, which is deferred resignation program, which when Elon Musk with the Doge depart, like what I don't remember, for a government efficiency program, right? They said that this government organizations are too inflated with people. We should fire more people, and so they are reducing. The first thing that goes is international humanitarian aid, like USAID was the first to go. So a lot of things that are being done by this current Trump administration is very inward looking. America first policy. Like, how about America? How about Americans? Why are we spending time caring about those people who are so far away from us? putting America as the center of the world kind of policy. So it's really tough to be optimistic in this environment. And I want to go back to the point that we talk on the what's the future is going to be like with this. If Trump is saying this kind of letter, probably he didn't think a big deal. You're right, probably it made May on Life's Day, as to have this President Trump writing to him. Like, is this like, I'm pretty discouraged by that action, to be honest. I'm sure this is me like having these feelings outside, away from Myanmar, but like, people inside the country, I'm not sure how they feel about it. Or are people like you said, like tired to move on to the better days of the election, to get over with it, or to continue fighting? Those are the questions that been in people's mind, I guess.
Yeah, and that's a good point about Trump favoring dictators, because maybe if someone did whisper Burma into his ear, he'd take an interest and then come out on the side of Min Aung Hlaing, which would be terrible. So maybe
Yeah.
we don't want him.
Maybe we don't. Yeah. And also, if you remember, when there was the United States election, and I think shortly after that was the Myanmar election. So after the election results came out, Trump said that there are voters fraud, right?
Yeah,
So, and then he tried to say that, oh, the election is rigged, Biden shouldn't have won. Those kind of narrative getting way more traction, and soon after, Myanmar military followed the same kind of narrative and have a coup. After this, people call in the United States the attempted coup for January 4th, but I tell them, you don't know what a coup is. If you think that is bad, I have terrible news for you.
Yeah.
So that, there were like one casualty from an accidental stampede and one person injured, I think, from the January 4th storming of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. But the coup, people keep referring to that as a coup. A lot of American friends say that, and it was really, really weird to hear that, knowing that by February 1st we have our coup that was a lot more violent. With that, there's different narrative that are being borrowed, because the United States, they think that they're just living their life, doing day-to-day thing, but it's a superpower country that a lot of countries look up to, including Myanmar, including the generals.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it's a good example that Trump is setting, probably giving false confidence to the people who should be that confident being dictators.
Yeah, just as I said with the letter, just and what he said about the election, for something which he might believe is a domestic thing or not necessarily a big thing, has such a big ripple effect across the world. I'm sure in lots of other countries in their own, with their own environments
Hello?
and dynamics as well. That election fraud, narrative that Trump pushed out, yeah, that absolutely had a huge impact on Min Aung Hlaing, because he felt like it was more justified for him to do that, and it normalized it. Oh, elections aren't actually real. It kind of normalized that, and it really empowered Min Aung Hlaing to do that. So, yeah, US, any little thing that comes from the US, huge impact across the world.
Yeah. We have covered a lot of things, and I want to go to my last point about in this political dynamic in the landscape. What we have noticed is that because of the coup and also because of the conscription law in Myanmar, a lot of especially young Myanmar people are leaving the country, and because of that, a lot of them are coming into Thailand either as refugees. Before the coup, there were always been migrant workers, people who are visiting Bangkok, Chiang Mai, but now it's different. A lot of them has come to Thailand as a safe haven or a pit stop while they're trying to figure out a third country to go to. What is the landscape in Thailand right now? Because you have cover Southeast Asia way before the coup, and you have frequented and living in Thailand. Have you noticed any difference in demographic and politics and different changes going on now versus then?
Yeah, I've seen a huge influx of Myanmar people in Thailand since the coup. They're refugees basically, but refugees come in all like shapes and sizes. So there's more kind of middle class refugees, I guess. I mean, people might think it's distasteful for me to describe them like that because there's actual refugees who are like running through a forest right now with their children away from Myanmar military jets. But there's been a huge influx of Myanmar people in Thailand. I feel very grateful to be in Thailand, and I like the country a lot. And I can't go back to Yangon, but I do see how Burmese people are treated in Thailand, and it's pretty terrible. Since the coup and this large influx of Myanmar people, I hear Burmese so much more in Bangkok and anywhere I go. Most places I go in Thailand, I'll overhear Burmese somewhere. I've made like lots of new Burmese friends who I didn't know in Yangon, but I met afterwards in Thailand just by coincidence. Even where I live, just going to the gym or going out to do shopping and just bumping into Burmese people. And can you imagine they get so surprised when I start talking to them and they're like, why does this weird guy know so much about my country, right? Like why is this British guy obsessed with my country? The last time the British were this obsessed with Burma, it didn't go well. But but yeah, I mean, I've made a lot of friends like that since the coup, and it's terrible, like the exploitation that Burmese people face in Thailand, the economic exploitation, and especially in Mae Sot, there's people who feel like they can get away with treating Myanmar people very badly because they don't come from a place of strength at the moment. The Myanmar military has just ruined Myanmar for so long that usually when they leave Myanmar, Myanmar people are in a place of they're underprivileged and they're basically ripe for exploitation. And it happens so much, and even in social attitudes towards Myanmar people. Like, I don't forget that I'm white from Britain. I don't like to make a big deal out of race globally because I don't think it's very healthy. But there are some things that like I can't ignore, and my life in Thailand is so much better than obviously than a Myanmar person's in how I'm treated by Thais because I'm treated as basically like a white tourist, right? Whereas Myanmar people are like looked down upon often. Yeah, I remember in Mae Sot taking my friend to hospital, who's a Burmese guy. He fell off a motorbike, and the way that the hospital staff like treated him was just so terrible. Uh, I I got in an argument actually with one of the staff, and then I was like, "This is not a good idea to start arguing in a hospital like this." But basically, they just told him to like go home and wash himself, wash his wounds and cuts after he fell off the motorbike. But he needed like serious medical attention. His arm was dislocated and he had like many injuries. And the woman told him to go home, basically because he was Burmese.
What?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was upset. He was obviously upset as well. But unfortunately, it happens quite a lot. And the more you spend time with Burmese people in Thailand, in places like that, especially Mae Sot, the more you see that happening, and the more you're like, whoa, like Burmese people are really exploited, preyed upon for money as well by police and in Mae Sot in particular. Um, really really difficult, and like there is some racism there. I've seen, and some Burmese friends have told me that like some, not all Thais as well, because I have Thai friends and like some Thai people are amazing too, so not, you can't generalize about everyone in anything, right? Anywhere we go, we're always going to find good and bad people. That's just how life is. But there does seem to be a strand of racism towards Burmese people. I've like my friends have said that Thai people have described them as dirty, and I remember actually like using a local sauna steam room, and there was a Thai police officer. I hope I don't get into trouble for saying this, but there's a Thai police officer who said to one of my friends that he only comes in there at a certain time of the day because in the evening, like the Burmese people come there, and he says that they're dirty, stuff like that,
Mm,
horrible racist stuff
mm.
like that. So, what do you think about it? Have you ever experienced that in Thailand? And what have your friends experienced?
I've visited Thailand since the coup, because that's the closest to home that I can feel in terms of food and people there. And honestly, sometimes being in Bangkok and Chiang Mai makes it feel almost at home because you hear Burmese people talking all the time to strangers that you don't know. And some Thai vendors even learn Burmese because there's so many Burmese customers. They wrote the prices and the description of things in Burmese, or like the description for toilet in Burmese, right? And some of them have terrible font, terrible spelling, but the effort is there. And I noticed that a lot of Thai people are learning Burmese in terms of, good for business and all of that. And so I don't really have a bar to compare to for before the coup. So, but the last time I was there, I remember going to this barbecue Burmese place, and people are singing a karaoke in Burmese, and it was just like home. It was just like 19th Street, drinking beer, eating barbecue, hanging out. And there I met a few Burmese young people that were there. I was very, very pregnant at the time in a bar. So I think I was very noticeable there. And so, track attention, and people just started chatting up with me, and we were talking. And this one young Burmese person, just really happy to see, to talk about um, similar struggles and all of that, and different. He's much, much younger. I think he's probably like 17, 18, telling me about the struggles that he faced trying to rent an apartment. They said that a lot of landlords don't want to rent to Burmese people,
Mm,
or they say don't go to this market, like, those kind of, like, a bit like, almost like, not like blatant racism, but there's like, oh, Burmese people, they're dirty, don't rent to them,
mm,
kind of comments all the time. And he has trouble finding a place to stay, so he stayed with his older brother cousin, who already have a standing relationship with a landlord that is, despite being Burmese, this landlord was so generous that they let them stay. So he was telling me about that, and about how he left Burma, but ended up with a PDF camp for briefly, because while he was avoiding conscription, he ended up fighting for a different thing. But he said, sister, I was really scared. He's very sweet boy, and he was like, I'm not tough, I don't want to be in any army. So, but he said, I was ashamed to leave the PDF, and with the help of my cousins and brothers, I finally got to Bangkok. But now the they call it, I guess, like, the owner of the shop that he works at also give him very low wage, knowing that he has nowhere else to go.
mm,
I think this is like, the exploitation that comes in, about knowing that these Burmese people have nowhere else to go. There's like, who is gonna offer you more money? Who is gonna offer you another place? Try it, right? Like, so the Thais are kind of delegating work that they don't want to do to Burmese people who are just happy to be there,
mm,
happy to have a job, happy to have a place to live. And that is really, really sad to see. And, of course, I'm a tourist coming from the United States, but I still have a Burmese passport. So even at the gate or somewhere that I need to show passport, as soon as they see I'm a Burmese, they're like, I don't know, can you even afford it? Kind of look
yeah.
for things that I have faced, but not like blatant kind of racism or discrimination that I have faced. But bear in mind that I was only there for like a week to eat and enjoy, and people are probably nicer because I was very pregnant. So it might be different, but these are the anecdotes that I see. Then that the as more and more people are departing from Yangon, and then the young people are congregating in, I'm not even saying like the border towns, but like, big cities in Thailand. It's with Thai people who are somewhat educated and also know the situation, but sometimes they see Burmese people as a nuisance. I don't know if you'll agree.
During the pandemic as well, the Burmese were seen as kind of a potential bringer of the COVID. In the same way that in other countries, foreigners were looked on with a lot of suspicion during that time of disease and pandemic. Just one more example of the economic exploitation faced by Burmese people in Thailand. My friend, who's pretty young, he's like 20, 21, who I knew him and his father in Yangon. He paid a lot of money to an agency in Yangon to come to Thailand, and the agency ripped him off and didn't fulfill like barely any of the promises, didn't get him a job in the end, left him out here by himself. And then finally he found a job in a restaurant, and it's mostly Burmese staff, almost all Burmese staff. And he's got on this meager salary, as you can imagine, and doesn't like working there, but whatever, right? He needs a job. And then they take money out of his salary if they think he's done something wrong, or if they perceive him to have to do. So if he doesn't wipe a table to their standard, and they can also just say anytime that's not to our standard, right? It just depends.
Right.
Then they'll take money out of his salary. So at the end of the month, he doesn't even get the full salary. And they also actually take the passports as well of the workers there, and they say, "Oh, we'll keep your passports for you." So it's probably something. Well, I will look into stuff like that. Like in his situation, he says that he can access his passport, so he said he can get it back, but like, where's he going to go if he gets it back anyway?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, that's just one story among like so many stories of exploitation. Beginning in Burma, it begins in Yangon with the agencies, and then they know what they're doing as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories about the broker in the middle. Like, I mean, that's like it's always like that. Like when a Rohingya trying to go to a third country or Malaysia by boat, somebody in the middle took money, tell them we'll do it, and sometimes they don't. Right? It's the same thing with Thailand. A lot of people were promised jobs in Thailand. Some of them don't even have a passport, so they came by land, walked across the border, came there, nowhere else to go, and then they have the promise of like applying for a different ID for work permit. Sometimes I think most of the time I think the employer has to sponsor them in some ways for them to work. But it is legal. I guess like it's barely legal in that sense, but um, the Burmese workers don't really have a better offer that they can leverage. And I think a lot of Thai employers know, and that's where the imbalance in power and the exploitation is the most apparent right now.
Yeah, people in desperate circumstances, unfortunately, always make easy targets for exploitation. And especially with the conscription, so many young people trying to escape the Myanmar junta's conscription, because then they'll just be cannon fodder for the resistance. So yeah, they've run into Thailand, and yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, I want to thank you for your time, and we have covered so many different topics, starting from the Aung San Suu Kyi's log to right now, looking forward into the future with the upcoming election, and I look forward to reading more on your articles. And for our listeners, can you tell us where we can find the archives of the articles that you write, and where we can follow you?
Thank you, E. I should tell your listeners, my articles are shorter than my answers on this podcast. I'm sorry about my long, rambling answers. Yeah, on Substack called On Myanmar. I'm on Twitter, if people still use that these days, on just Lorcan Lovett, Lorcan_Lovett. But Substack, I think, is a good place. So on Myanmar at Substack, and then, yeah, just the usual social media stuff. And doing some stuff for British media, international media. But please subscribe to my Substack if you're interested in keeping up with Myanmar. As I said, I'll promise I'll keep my articles short.
Thank you so much for coming back on the podcast, and I don't mind your long answers at all. I mean, you give a very comprehensive insight into what it's like to cover, and also thank you for sharing your knowledge on many years of covering Myanmar. I think that is valuable for our audience as well.
Thanks so much for the invitation. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's interview. As many of you know, our nonprofit organization, Better Burma, has been steadfast in providing humanitarian aid to vulnerable communities across Myanmar since the 2021 coup. However, another devastating consequence of the military takeover has been the near total collapse of Myanmar's economy. Trade and tourism have dried up, leaving many artisan communities without any opportunities to sustain their livelihoods. To address this challenge, Better Burma brings their lovely handicrafts directly from their workshops to you. These are beautiful handmade items. They're more than just unique gifts. They're a lifeline for some, providing dozens of artisans and their families with the chance to rebuild sustainable businesses and support their communities along with that. Part of every purchase also contributes to our ongoing nonprofit mission, amplifying the impact of your support. So we invite you to explore these unique crafts. Visit betterburma.org/shop. And if you'd prefer, you can also support our mission through a direct donation by visiting insightmyanmar.org/donation.
What about Yarananga Unyana, Dadu Yadan Ganeza, we got a Besayana, Besayo. Oba Yarananda, Dayananga, Yaranaya, Dayanam, Boda, Yaranam.